Madam President,
Senator from Vermont.
I do not want the United States of America to be involved in yet another regime change war in Iran. Have we not learned anything from what happened in Iraq? We deposed Saddam Hussein and all hell broke loose. That was a war of regime change. No sense, since it wasn't related to 9/11. We had a regime change war in Afghanistan and then went on to embrace nation building. Thousands of Americans, men and women, who answered the call of the president, reported for duty, lost their lives, lost their limbs, are suffering today with PTSD. Trillions of taxpayer dollars have been spent and wasted. And yet, in the Middle East, the flashpoint now is Iran. And we came within an eyelash of getting dragged into yet another war where the goal was regime change. Mr. President, I want to acknowledge the professionalism of our Air Force and our men and women in the military. The strike they were ordered to perform, they executed flawlessly. To them, I extend my congratulations. But the question for us is who authorizes the use of force? Our men and women will do what it is the Commander-in-Chief requires and do what it is Congress authorizes. We all have confidence in that. But this was a wake-up call for us because we came within an eyelash of being in a conflict where the goal would have been the Netanyahu goal of regime change. And what we did in this action with the president's decision to send our bombers in at the request of Netanyahu was essentially put in the hands of the Iranian government the question of how far this war would go. Would they turn the other cheek, which is essentially what they did? Or would they retaliate in a way, as President Trump said, that he would rain hellfire on them and have us in a war? The point here of the Kane resolution is that if this country is going to make that decision, it must be Congress that authorizes that decision. It must be Congress that has the debate about what are the national security concerns, what are the costs, and what are the benefits. We can't simply bypass that and continue to abdicate our responsibility and congressional authority and duty. And that's why this resolution is so important. Now, this question of how do we get here? You know, wars oftentimes happen not by design. You stumble into it. And that is what almost happened here. We do not want a nuclear Iran. There's nobody in this United States Senate that wants a nuclear Iran. Russia doesn't want a nuclear Iran. China doesn't want a nuclear Iran. And our presidents, bipartisan, have worked hard to make certain that Iran didn't have it. And the Obama agreement was working. After President Trump was not President Trump, he challenged the agreement. When he got elected, he tore it up. But he saw at some point the wisdom of diplomacy. And he was engaged in active negotiations about a non-nuclear Iran and was making progress on those. That was objected to by Prime Minister Netanyahu. He was against the JCPOA that Obama was negotiating, and actually, as a foreign leader, came to this United States Congress and gave a speech in conflict with the Commander-in-Chief of the United States, where he lobbied in this Capitol against entering into an agreement that ultimately made us more secure. That determination on his part continues. And the biggest act of sabotage to the Trump negotiations on a nuclear agreement was the bombing campaign that Netanyahu did that sabotaged those talks. Now again, I say congratulations to our men and women in uniform who, when they were ordered by the President to do the strike on the nuclear facilities, did it and did it well. But we should not at all discount how precarious that situation was for our country. It was a result of a decision by Iran to turn the other cheek, to disregard the attacks, and basically not escalate. And I'm so glad they did. And the President showed temperance there himself. But we can't be putting ourselves in a position where our future, and whether we do get in a war, is based on actions of other people, particularly folks who run Iran. So if we are going to protect the national security, if we are going to protect the men and women of this country who will always respond to the call of the commander-in-chief, that's what makes them such wonderful patriots. They cede the authority to make a decision about whether they are put in harm's way to the men and women who serve in the Congress of the United States and the commander-in-chief. That's a profound responsibility that each of us has to debate the question of whether we should commit this country to war. So this resolution is absolutely vital. Vital to the well-being of this country, to the humility that is required of a country before it makes the ultimate decision to ask the men and women who are citizens of our country to potentially sacrifice their lives for the well-being of this country. Mr. President, I urge my colleagues to support the Kane resolution. I yield back.